Welcome to Chew the Fat. In this series, I sit down with high-performance guests and we talk about life, business, and what it takes to be at the top. This is part of my mission to raise $1 million for charity by writing a cookbook called Eat with Purpose. But I'm going to need your help. If you can share the content and leave a review, it's going to make a massive impact. And the bigger the audience, the greater the reach, and the sooner we can get to that $1 million goal. Enjoy the episode.
As you know, the part of Chew the Fat is having a recipe from Eat with Purpose. Today, you've asked for omega-3, high-dense omega-3 food. So I went Tasmanian salmon for you, a little bit of low-carb potatoes, because I judged from the ask that you're a low-carb man, with a nice little salad. So let's get stuck in.
It's amazing. Thank you.
No worries. So talk to me. Omega-3, why we're a big fan?
It means I can work out harder.
Yeah.
Good to cardiovascular for me as well, but it's genetics. Like everyone does something differently. So
Let's finish up and we'll get stuck into our conversation.
Tristan Sternson, welcome to Chew the Fat.
thank you.
So where I want to start today is a moment in your life. And there's a moment I was reading up about is you're in Israel, you're covered in mud, complete shock. Your sister has just thought that you had died. Bring me back to that and what had unfolded and how that shaped you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, wow, starting deep. So that was a moment where, as you said, I was kind of standing on a bridge that collapsed. People died around me. And there was a point in that which kind of, a point of failure. Like I always look back on that. And it's only been over the recent years I've looked back on that and gone, how did that actually shape me? Because I don't think it did, but it actually did. And what happened was at the time, you talked about the mud, the process that went through my mind when the actual crisis was happening was, sitting back and watching people around me. I was a 17-year-old and what people would do to kind of, help in the situation. I've moved from that to become the leader. So I was one of the people just waiting to be saved. And from that, I've become a real Mr. Fix-It. It's kind of like if I see something, now I know how I would react in, no one knows how they're going to react in severe crisis like that. And now I do know how. So for me, it's kind of like, the point of failure, what do you do? Bang, this is what we do. Really thinking through the process. I didn't think at that point in time. I just waited, right? Everything I do, like it's nuts. I'll go buy, like the food we ate before, buy a piece of fish. I'll think through every part of it, like analyze to the nth degree. That's how that shaped me from that moment forward, yeah.
And for the audience that doesn't know the story, and I'm sure you've shared it many times, but for these things, it's always really important to get that context. Like, what was it you were doing on that bridge, and why did it happen? Yeah,
so it was a triathlete. I was a semi-professional triathlete at the time, and I was a junior. It was a Maccabea Games, which is like the Jewish Olympics, which is a big thing, right? People go on from there to race in the Olympics. I was a sponsored athlete to go over. And that was the opening ceremony. So they built this bridge, you walk into the stadium and it's like an Olympic opening ceremony, like we see in Paris at the moment, right? The bridge being the second country with an A in it, we were Argentina, then Australia. Australia walks through, they had a smaller team. We walked through, the pressure on the bridge collapsed and it fell from the middle inwards. I was fortunate enough to be in the one row, the first row that got flung back onto the shores, not into the water, because everyone in the water fell on top of each other. Small little bridge, had jet fuel and all sorts of nasty shit in it. And yes, if you got that into you, 4 people did, got drowned in it, and just, a few people, severe long-term injuries and illnesses, and not a pretty thing. But that was what it was. Going from triathlon to business now,
And share with me, you mentioned you're sitting there and you're waiting. Like, can you remember what was going through your mind in that moment?
Yeah. I was sitting there. Well, I wasn't sitting there. I was standing there. So flung back onto the shores. You hear a massive crack, right? Because if a bridge collapses, you can imagine the bang that goes to that. I'm in Israel, right? It's not the safest place in the world, right? And all you see are, whether they were police or army, I don't know, right? They were just uniformed officers running towards you, right? So you think you're under attack. 17-year-old kid, like I'm thinking to myself, I'm in a white tracksuit. I'm like, 2 things went through my mind. Are we being attacked by something? Because all these army soldiers running towards you. So I'm like, where do I go? What the fuck do I do? Right? You know, what's next? And I'm looking around and no one knew what to do. Everyone was panicking. And then the second thing, which was odd, that went through my mind is, I'm in a white tracksuit and I'm in mud. I've still got to go through the opening ceremony. And as a 17-year-old, that's probably something that people would think about. It's like, so I'm trying to like step around and not step in the mud. I'm like, we're still going to walk through. And I'm a trained lifeguard as well at the time. And yeah, I'd done the bronze medallion and all that. And yeah, as being a triathlete, some of you do. I could surf, swim in the surf really well. So I had all the skills to save people. And they were the things that went through my mind, which really disappointed me at the time as well. Well, afterwards, when I reflect back on it.
Yeah.
And that didn't really hit me that it was real, like until that point you mentioned where my sister, who wasn't there, who was a champion athlete, she was off resting up for the next day for her race, you know, saw a person on TV who had fallen in and looked exactly like me and thought that was me. And that's when it really hit home.
Wow.
Yeah.
And apart from this experience, was just clearly really impactful, right?
Yep.
What else in your childhood do you think shaped you to be the person you are today?
Yeah. I'm the fourth of four children. So I'm a family that immigrated from Scotland to Australia in 1980. 1981. I was 18 months old. So fourth of four children, family with a father who had a business in Scotland building parkas or jackets. Good business. So, not at the time. That was during a recession, so it wasn't so great then. Got out of that, came to Australia, had to restart entire career. A mother who was a school teacher with 4 kids in 4 different schools at a point, trying to bring up this family. When you're the fourth of four, you get forgotten, right? Literally, you get forgotten at McDonald's when they get in the car and drive home. So you've got to fight for yourself, right? You've got to kind of, it's a fourth child syndrome in any family, but that was kind of the one where I think shaped me. Being a fourth of four, an immigrant family, starting from nothing to get somewhere and observing how everyone else went. I in hindsight or foresight of what I've seen, I got to learn from everyone else that got to go through that in a family. So I was probably the fortunate one because I didn't have to lead the way. I could take examples from others. So yeah.
That's really interesting. And I had a big smile and laugh, as you said, forgotten in places. Now, I'm third of three. And there's a story that my parents always like to bring up often after like 2 glasses of wine, which is the time where they would just leave me on the beach, and because my brothers were a little bit older and they'd go swimming and they would dig a little hole. I think it was like 1.5 back in the day when you did this, and they'd dig a little hole and leave me on the beach. And I think they said one day, like, because we're in South Africa, I'm born in South Africa, like a little monkey came on the beach and started coming towards me. So they got out of the water. Anyway, we digress. Yeah. So share with me the transition from a triathlete into business, and ultimately, like, what are those key traits that you think helped you in the business world?
Yeah, so I never saw myself as an athlete. Like, even though I was racing at the highest level, and there was, it wasn't an Olympic sport. The first Olympics was 2000. Technically in the first squads to go through that as a junior, wouldn't have made it, but raced overseas for Australia. Going from that, I was always going to go into the business world. Yeah, like I was following the path of what my father did as a businessman, and he was, he rose up the ranks in Myers and did really well, and that's what I wanted to do. So I wanted to do technology, and I wasn't a technology person. This is probably doesn't show from my age, but this is 1997 when I finished school, and technology, the internet came about in 96. So I'm kind of like, something's going to happen here. Something did happen, obviously. And so I wanted to get into the world of business. So I looked to find where I wanted to do that. And the best place was to get a graduate position at like a management consulting firm. So I found a university course that would get me into that. And that's what I did. So that was my transition. As I went through it, I learned new things, just like I did in triathlon. I was like a really short career in triathlon because I probably started when I was 14 and finished when I was like 19, right? Yeah. So in that period of time, I learned everything I needed to do. And the same thing with tech. Like I learned it really, really quickly. Went into it saying I'm going to be a business consultant. I can't code. I never will code. And came out of it as a database administrator, coding everything, right? and that was just unbelievable for me. Yeah.
And so I understand that was with Accenture?
It was with PwC.
Okay, yes.
It was actually a pretty cool story. So back in the day, the 2000 boom, so when everything boom and busted, PwC wanted to hold on to their graduates just after I finished uni. And so what they did was they offered you to take 12 months off or 18 months off, and they gave you tax-free money instead of a redundancy, and the government allowed that, which was really good.
That's clever.
So I went and I got a contract job, which ended up being for Larry Kesselman for Dodo Internet.
Yeah, right.
So there's a story on its own. Right? So I fell into this job there was like 4 others, and my mate Scott, who then ended up being the CEO and is one of Larry's business partners now.
Wow.
Like, we're all in our first job.
Yeah.
And I got it because I knew how to do databases from uni.
Yeah.
And that actually was probably a big start to what I do today and the entrepreneurial flair, because Larry was 35 when he started Dodo. And the success he's had since then and to where he is now, everyone wants to replicate that sort of success.
Yeah.
So I learned it from the best, which was, I guess, an accident, because I would have gone to PwC and I probably would have, been down the path of partnership for the rest of my life, which would have probably bored me.
the partnership almost trap. We're going to digress again. Yeah. I did a talk at, I'm not going to share where because this will get this poor guy in trouble. A talk at a big law firm, and I got pulled aside by this guy, and he had that look in his eye, and he's like, man, I wish I got into business. he's like, I'm on that fast track to be a partner. I work 90 hours a week. You see the soul had left his body. And I was like, oh, you poor soul, you poor man.
Wow. Yeah.
So then the transition into starting your own business. And I guess, what I want to share with the audience is, a lot of people are listening. It's, they're in that job and they haven't made that leap. And so just understanding, I guess, that actually the psychology element, which is taking that dive and kind of, let's say, risking it all in context, is what's really important. So share with me, what was it that was burning desire and what pushed you to start?
Yeah, so I actually started a lot of businesses before I started my first successful business.
Got it.
Right? So in university, 1999, Y2K bug.
Yes.
I was the guy who bought the Symantec disk, put it in your floppy drive at the time, and charged you $70 or $100 or whatever it is, and made $35 off it, and made money off that to travel.
Yeah.
I tried doing blankets from India in AFL colours. You might want to work out if you need a license for that when you bring it back. That's what we learned from that one, because we couldn't sell them. We even tried. Do you remember those coffee cups where people would advertise on them?
Yeah.
We did that. We had a business called Sample Size with my mate. So I tried everything. So all these things. I always had the entrepreneurial flair. So when I actually started business with InfoReady, the first real business we did, the big one, I actually didn't think of the risks behind it. It's kind of, for me, it was always going to happen.
Yes.
I actually had a cousin, and he won't remember this, but I had a coffee with him. He lives in London. All my family's in London. And he said to me, if you're going to do something on your own, because I lived in London for a year, or in Liverpool, and we were going to come back, and I was going to get straight into the business side of it. And he said to me, well, if you're going to do something, work out the best way to do it. Do your research and learn from the best. That's actually why I went to Accenture, because I worked for PwC, and then I had to go to Accenture because one was really good at delivery and one was really good at sales. You put the two together, you got everything. You got to build that model yourself. And that's where I learned about it. So when I went out first time, I didn't really think about the cash side of it, but I did start in my basement, garage, whatever, room in the house.
The classic entrepreneur starting.
And actually one of my current business partners, who was the first guy who started with me, he would come down to Melbourne and we worked on a deal together, and he would actually stay in our house. And so it was a real true startup side of it. We do work out of it because he was from Brisbane. We do work out at the airport lounge. It was pretty cool. So that's how we got it started. But yeah, taking that risk was a bit risky, but no kids, small mortgage. The risk was, I could have walked back into a job if I had to, but I always had a plan. If it failed, this is what I would do next.
Got it. Yep. And what was that? Was the plan, I'll go back into the job and go back into the partnership pathway?
Yeah, the 90 hours drain the life out of me, work as hard as I can to become a partner. Yeah.
So I'm going to pause there and just double down for everybody who's listening, because that is the important thing that I'm starting to hear more and more. And I first hear it really clear from Bridget Loudon from Expert 360 was the worst case scenario, provided you don't have too many dependents, the mortgage and all that stuff, is the worst case scenario is I go back to the thing I was doing right now. And so the thing you're doing right now, which is that job, it's kind of like the baseline. Yep. And so you can always go back. And I think it's a really healthy way to start, because, I think there's a nice little balance, or certainly was for me, which is the blend of ignorance and naivety to go what's the worst that can happen to jump in, because if you think about every risk and every permutation, you can just kind of get analysis paralysis and not end up moving forward.
Well, you can, but you asked me the question around financial, right? Like that's where everyone leads into it. Like, what are you going to lose financially if this doesn't work? But a lot of people don't think about the mental side of it, right? So what are you going to lose with the regret of never having tried?
Yeah.
Right? And that's probably how I'm wired a little bit differently. It's like, yeah, money's good, but, you only live once, right? And if you don't do things in a way that's going to make your life happier, right? That's great. And maybe I would have liked the part, like when I was at PwC, I thought partnership would be awesome, right? I really liked that path, and it could have been. But, I flipped around and I thought, well, this is what I want to do. And, so had I lost on that business and moved into a smaller apartment and downsized and gave it a go again, I probably would have been mentally happier than I would have been had I not tried in the first place.
For sure, 100%. And so something you mentioned there around Accenture and that delivery piece and the learning from the sales and learning from the delivery, I kind of actually want to unpack that a little bit. Like, what were those lessons that you learnt that you think fundamentally helped you in that first, as you called it, successful business? Yeah,
so PwC was amazing as a local business. Like they're a Big Four consulting firm and they operate locally. Accenture is a big American firm, right? So the way they operate is completely different. So it was around, it's like a lot of trades or a lot of service people. When you're in business, you're very good at what you do, but it's hard to ask, right? Ask a question like, I'm going to give you this service. You got to pay for it, right? Americans are really good at that, right? And we're not in Australia. It's like, oh yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, she'll be right. Yeah, anything for you, mate. That sort of thing, right? And you don't charge for it. So a lot of people who learn from that environment just don't learn the commercial side of it, right? In Accenture, it was P&L, right? It was how many people on your bench, who weren't being utilised on projects. It was, it's all this sort of stuff. And when you learnt that cadence, that was real business mechanics, right? Now, you learn that in your own business really quickly because if you don't make money, you got to get it from somewhere to pay payroll. But if you can learn that from someone else in the first instance, you just get that learning opportunity, which is really good. And do it on their money, right?
Yeah, that's key.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to InfoReady, you've decided it's time to sell that business. Firstly, like, what was it that kind of drove you to make that decision? Was it a big amount of time? And then secondly, what were the learning lessons through going through the process of selling a business?
Yeah, I always wanted to take the business and grow it bigger, right? And while I'm a little bit risk averse to some extent in that, growing a business when it's your own money. And at the end of it, I had two other partners with me who joined along the journey. As we grew the business, it was kind of, how much risk do you take with your own money, especially when it's your first startup, right? So the aim was to roll it into something bigger and help someone who wanted to build what we already had and grow that bigger. And that was Melbourne IT. And they had a plan at the time where it was 2013, they started an enterprise business, which was really, they're a domain business, right? You buy a domain name off them, very, very different to building a mobile app for Qantas, right? So they needed us to help them build that. So I saw a real need for us to get into that and build a bigger business. So I actually didn't know whether or not that was going to be the exit to go into Melbourne IT and then I would exit and go again.
Yes.
Or whether my future lied in Melbourne IT, which is actually probably the hardest 3 years of my life because the uncertainty around that, the first exit, like, and we've done it, now we've done it multiple times. It's like next time around, I know exactly what to expect, but you sit there and you're like, well, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? Sometimes the easiest thing is hand over the keys and walk away.
Yeah.
Right? But that's not what we did it for. We did it for growth. And every time we've exited, we've done it for the growth of the business and the pride to make sure that business continue to grow.
Got it. Okay. So one thing I've done terribly for the audience, they might be sitting on the edge of their seat or car seat and going, what's going on, Frank, is I don't help explain what was that business that you sold in terms of what did it do, just to give that context?
Yeah. That's my fault too. I should explain my businesses.
Nothing is your fault around here. It's all my fault.
That's all right. InfoReady was a data and analytics business. So we started in 2009, sold in 2016. 2009, just after the GFC.
Great time.
So data was a huge problem. And the thing we started with, this is, now I put my tech nerd hat on.
Yes.
It was data governance.
Okay.
Right? Which everyone goes back then was, oh, geez, that's really bloody nerdy, right?
Yeah.
It's not even like cool reports on your sales or your revenue.
Yeah.
This was protecting your data. And it's now done full circle because with Gen AI, what's the biggest thing everyone's concerned about? The protection of their data. So we're kind of back in that stage. So that's what we did. Data and analytics, got it to about 150 people and then sold it to Melbourne IT. Then the next business was what we call an enterprise tech services business. So it was mobile apps. some website sort of stuff as well, cloud solutions, data and analytics, artificial intelligence, anything that's on the digital side of businesses. So, and for all major corporates. So everyone who's listening has probably used something somewhere, whether you've flown on a plane or used one of our banking apps, or you got a phone call to sell you a service that you really wanted because our analytics was really good.
Love it. Okay, good. All right, everybody relax. Everybody get back to your car seat. We're back, okay? And I guess I'm stepping through the journey piece because I want to, more than just kind of the chronological journey, which I'm sure you've shared many times, is like start getting to the meat and potatoes around those learnings. And so the first piece I want to go to is we were talking while I was cooking that piece of fish, which hopefully we both enjoyed. I think we did. We were talking about you sold the business and then you bought it back. And then you sold it again. I want to unpack that because I had the smile on my face that was probably very noticeable. So I want to share that for the audience because I think, as I would use the term, it was gangster. It was very cool. So let's share that.
Yeah. So we sold the business in 2016.
Yep.
That was on a 3-year earnout.
Yep. And can we talk numbers to give you the context?
Yeah. So I'll give you the numbers. So we took a punt on that.
Yep.
Right? We sold the business with we sold the original sale price was 15 million.
Yes.
Right. But we had earnouts. And as we did it, we knew the business was going to be worth more as a bigger business. So we ended up exiting for about just under 36 million.
Beautiful.
Was the total number at the end.
Three
3-year earnout.
Sorry, three founders or was it yourself and 2 partners?
Yeah, myself and 2 partners.
Any external capital?
No external capital at all.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
very good.
So we saw the exit as our external capital to grow it to the next stage. And we backed ourselves. I remember the advisor saying to me, "You sure you want to go this aggressive?" And I'm like, "This business is going to boom. Like, trust me, it's going to boom." And so he did. He had a kicker on it if it boomed, which one of my partners at the end was like, "Oh, fuck, we paid him." And I'm like, no. He came up with a deal and we did well out of it, so it's good. At the end of that 3-year reign, we were kind of guiding this new business. So Melbourne IT was a really good business, but they were for small to medium-sized businesses, right? So they would sell you a domain name, they'd sell you a website, but they were really more of a volume business. Hundreds of thousands of domain names, hundreds of thousands of websites. And building this other business was very different for them. It was an enterprise business. So you could have one customer who would represent their entire revenue of the other half of the business. They didn't do that very well. And then they tried to join them together. The strategy was sound to some extent. It just didn't work. And when that didn't work, the business had a bit of a crisis. The share price plummeted. It was a public company, so a lot of people would have seen what happened. And
that's actually really interesting. Do you know what else is interesting? The Eat with Purpose cookbook. It's part of my mission to raise $1 million for charity. This podcast is a part of that goal. And what you can do is like, comment, share, and leave us a review. Let's get back to the guest.
The chairman called me one day and said to me, "We'd like you to come to Sydney to a board meeting." And I did, and I knew exactly what was happening and put me in to run that business as the CEO of a public business.
Yes.
At that stage, we had to recover very, very quickly, right? The business probably didn't have more than a year left in it, life-wise, cash flow.
So just for help me also, the share price went through a significant downturn. Also the revenue and profit. Like it was just the totality of the thing was just...
I think, well, the revenue was pretty stable to some extent. Like it didn't go down in proportion to the profit. The profit went down a fair bit.
Yeah, okay.
The share price went down even more.
Yeah, right.
Because it was as a tech stock and a well-known tech stock, the market doesn't always react exactly the same way as the business does. So, but it was in troubling times anyway. So I came in, ran the business, and at first thing the strategy we put in place is we need to separate these 2 businesses out. They're completely different. It's like we were selling boats and cars to the same people.
Yes.
And we're selling the cars to people who wanted a boat and vice versa. It just didn't work, right?
Yeah.
So we split it up. And so I knew the enterprise side. So I said, we'll keep that as a public bit because that's what I know how to run, and we'll sell the other half. The other half was more valuable, but wasn't achieving the prices that we wanted.
Yes.
So then we put the other one to the market, and then and we had a shareholding in that business too. And so we were like, well, maybe we want to buy it, which is really interesting when you're the CEO because you have to be not part of the sale and you've got to be not part of the buying. You've got to be completely partial to the whole thing, partial to it. So we stepped away from it and we ended up bidding against it, and we were the lucky people who ended up buying half the business, the enterprise half. The other half we kept on the market, and then that sold later to someone else. So we bought half of it. And then 2 years later,
And what was the dollar figure there for allowed to
bought
share?
it for 35 million.
Yes.
And we put a bit of capital in, so 42 million.
Yep.
And we bought that alongside Quadrant Private
Yes.
Equity. And we did that. Same partners, another minor partner came in, and we had a management equity pool of staff as well that were important to us. We built that out, and then 2 years later, I had this crazy idea. COVID hit, by the way.
Yep.
And when COVID hits,
What a time to be alive.
like
yep.
I was like, I'm glad to have a big brother on the side of me in
Yeah,
Quadrant
yeah.
because these guys knew what to do. And I was like, yeah, it's quite soothing when you got, calming, when you got someone alongside you to help you. They were amazing to work with. Like you hear these private equity stories, you watch these, US TV shows and whatever, and the shiny suits come along and tell you what to do, whatever. It's completely the opposite. Like I'll tell you about the sale in a second, but 2 years later, I said to him, I know where I want this business to go. Like this business needs to be an Asia Pacific business. And there's only really a few buyers that can buy it. And I knew one of the companies out of Singapore called NCS, which was owned by Singtel. I said, they are the perfect home. So I said to Quadrant, I said, let me approach them, see if I can sell it, but let me have a clear run at it. And I spoke to their CEO, we had a chat about it, and we said, sure, let's make it happen. And so I ran the sale process.
Wow.
With Quadrant obviously assisting, but like very different for them. There was no major bank involved in the sale, investment bank. There was nothing that we did it all ourselves, and and we got it done, and we got a record for them. We got a 10xer in 2.1 years, which is good enough to get them a few trophies and a few people, a few new cars, I presume too. Yeah.
And what was that end number?
At 290 million.
290. Okay, so I'm going to pause there for everybody. Get back on the edge of your seats. So let's just play that in a really quick session. You founded a business, you've created it, you've sold it for roughly 30 to 40, including the earnout.
Yeah.
It's part of a new entity. That doesn't quite work out over time as a merged entity. Split up. You step in as CEO, split it up. You buy back, and then you buy it back at 42, and 3 years later you sell it for 290. That is the headline. That got me very excited and I had a huge smile on my face. I hope it does for everybody else. That is crazy cool. But let's now pull out the learnings. Like, what do you think? What was it if you had to pick 2 or 3 things that made it from 42 to 290 in 3 years? Like, let's bring it home for everybody.
So the number one learning was understanding your business, right?
Yes.
What do they say? Eat your own dog food,
Yeah.
right? If you don't do that, your business can't succeed, right? And that's something I've always done, right? I'm a techie by trade. I could build, I tell people I could build anything my team could build.
Yeah.
Probably can't now. I used to joke. I used to walk around the business and tell people I used to say, oh, you're the number 2 coder, or you're the number 2 app developer, because I'm the number 1, right?
You should write a leadership book.
Exactly. So I love that side of it, but understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
The previous CEO didn't even meet with customers, right? So that's number 1, right? So I call it an easy win there, because all I had to do was meet all my customers, talk to them about their stuff, grow their business, and you're done.
Can we pause on that one? Because I think it's really, really important.
Yep.
When you say understand your business, so it's like understand the granularity, understand the details. So therefore you can understand by having this conversation with the customers, the problems you're solving and like double down on them. Can you just help me bring to light what it is that you think that understand part really helps elevate?
Yes, understanding 2 parts. One is actually understanding what you're building, right? So if you're building a house, you should understand the structure of it, right? Yes. And know what that is, and don't just trust everyone around you. Really get into the details of it. Number 2 is understand your customers, right? So talk to them, right? We had a famous story in our business, or maybe it's an infamous story in our business. We spoke to a customer who was a massive opportunity, like big project for us. And the customer said 2 things to me, right, in the meeting. And one of them was we need to return capital to the business. And number 2 is you guys did an amazing job, right? Did an amazing job. Our team walks out of that and says, these guys loved what we did. They're going to invest the same amount of money year on, year out. And it's just going to keep going. And I'm like, really? I thought they just said they need to return capital to their shareholders, which means the money's now going to go back to the shareholders next year. Anyway, I understood that. No one else did, right? I sat down with them afterwards and said, what do you actually want? And we went through the whole thing and like sitting down with the customers and understanding what they need, not just I need a mobile app, I need a cloud solution. Yeah, we went into a customer who we wanted to build them a wayfinding solution. And they said, we want our customers to get lost in our warehouses. Right? Because that's what they enjoy and they buy more.
Yeah.
I'm like, why would we want to build you something you don't want? Right?
Yes.
It's that. So it's really understanding them.
Okay.
so glad I asked that follow-up question, because what you've just shared there is super important and so good when it comes to customers, and it translates to so many businesses.
Yeah.
And understanding that when you're having that conversation with the customer, they might be saying something, but if you don't drill into the why and actually go down into the iceberg, they're sharing the problem because they don't know from your position what tech can be built, and sharing what they believe. By asking those series of questions, you actually get to the root cause of the problem and go, oh, no. But we need to do this.
Yeah.
Very good. I love that. That's awesome.
So that was number one. So number two for me was really become part of the team, right? Like services, every business is a team sport. When I worked in PwC, I walked around going, I can't wait till that day I have an office, right? Then I went to Accenture and I walked around going, I really would never want to have an office, right? Then when I started my own business, I've said never, ever have an office. You sit in the open. You sit with everyone. You are a team, right? I love working with my team. The first day after I went in as the CEO. I was up here in Sydney, addressed the team up here, came down to Melbourne where most of the team that I knew were, because that's where we founded our business. And I turned around and did a bit of a speech to the team. And I said, we're going to have, we're going to do things differently. We're going to have like T-shirt Tuesday. And one of my still works with us, staff members turned around to me and said, why don't we just do it every day? So me being a bit of a smart ass, wore T-shirts every day except for Tuesday for a while, just to show that I listen to them. But it's been part of the team. Like, we just do fun things. Like we have fun. Like last week we got a Vision Pro. We all did the satisfying peel together. Like it's got to be a team sport. And that's when people have fun, people who have fun together will stay together and they'll work harder for each other and they'll build better stuff together. And my core team is still here from the InfoReady days. And we've been through, technically 3 acquisitions in that period of time. People leave during that period, but the core guys are still there. Yeah.
That's cool.
So that's number 2 for me. And my number 3 is always lead by example.
Yep.
So I wouldn't ask someone to do something I wouldn't do myself, right? So if I say to someone, go follow up these sales leads, I've got to be prepared to get on the phone and follow up sales leads. If I ask someone to go and, test on a Sunday to make sure something works because it's critical for whatever, I'll make sure I'm willing to do that as well. I actually learned that from one of my business partners who, both my 2 main business partners. One of them is the guy you would throw into any tech project whenever there's a crisis because you just know it's going to get sorted, right? And watching him lead into that is just unbelievable, right? So everyone knows you've got their back. So everyone wants to feel comfortable that there's someone out there that can help you when you need to, right? It's not about the teach people to fish versus fishing sort of thing. It's more about the fact that we would be prepared to do whatever we needed to do to get it done. So that's it. That's the third one.
Love it. Okay. And those 3 things you think made the most material disproportionate uplift to be able to make that change in 3 years?
Yeah, definitely. So the leaders before me were, didn't understand their customers. Definitely not team players. Like I remember multiple executives in one of the businesses kind of coming around, and if you want, they would schedule time to walk around the office in the morning.
Oh, that's adorable.
It's like, if you see it in your diary, it's like, this 15 minutes, I need to walk around and I need to say good day to these people. I walk in. That's naturally like I'm not the most extroverted person, but I walk in and. Maybe it's a bad thing for me because it takes me an hour to get to my desk. Like I just talk to everyone and I know everyone and I love it. And I've always said if I ever have to schedule time to meet people, I've got to quit. I've got to be out of there, right? It means I don't want to be there. So that's people like that, like and then having all these different things like just no, we got to let this person do the job and they've got to do that. They'll learn by failing. Yeah, people learn by failing, but if they've got no one to teach them, right, they're going to fail even harder. Right? So it's all those things. So I've seen it happen. So I've kind of done off that. And if I go back to the days with Dodo and Larry, there was this famous moment where in 2001, whenever the GST came in, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's a whole new thing when we built Dodo, and the developer who built the first billing app was charging everyone $9.99. They were famous for it. You forgot about the GST. And I remember going into Larry's office with this person, and the person was white. Like, what's Larry going to do? It was like, it's a mistake. We'll fix it. He probably lost shitloads of money, right, that day, just on that, working out that we'd probably been charging customers for ages, no GST. And then we had to pay, the GST came out of what we were paying. And then you had to go through the whole, how do you add it on and all that. But that's a different level to, you know, I remember, you know, a CFO in one of our businesses, you made a mistake. Geez, you would run as far as you could because you just did not want to cop the wrath of that, right? It's a different way of doing it.
I love it. So here's the thing, right? So super important lessons. And one of the things I've realized recently with having these conversations with people like yourself, very successful, have big numbers, is from an audience perspective, and this is a hypothesis, if you will, I've been thinking about.
Yep.
You know, they hear 290 million and they're like, but come on, Frank, you know, I'm just about to start my business. I'm in the early days. That just seems so outrageous. But one of the things we talked about before was around the next kind of business that you've got your sights on. And I think let's unpack that, because that's really interesting for people to then see. You've had these, you know, 3 acquisitions. You've been a leader in a big company, but now you're getting stuck straight back in and you're going to that ground zero. So let's start with the context, because we'll learn our lesson. Like, what is it that you're doing and what's compelling you to get there? And then we're just going to go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, so I call it a side project or a passion project, because I'm still running the tech business as well. But with 2 of my mates who are down in the longevity rabbit hole, right? So you get to the age where you turn around and you wake up one morning and go, you know, am I losing my energy? Like, am I not quite there? And it's back to, you know, one day, you know, one of my mates were talking about, it's like, I remember how fit and healthy I was as a 17-year-old triathlete. Geez, I wish I had that now. So I went down this longevity path and spent a lot of time in the US kind of testing my body, my blood markers, going through different treatments and stuff. I've done some extreme things. I've done some not so extreme things, but I've noticed a lot of benefits to myself. So as a passion, I thought, well, I want to bring that back to Australia, right? So it's another one of these ones where I've kind of gone into a business. I'm not worried about, I should be worried about it because we've poured a lot of money into the startup of it and we've got a great team running it. We're not as active in it, but we're the users of it and we're really passionate. So longevity being, help you feel better and live longer, basically. Yeah. Starting with like measuring your bloods and then going through things like nutrition, exercise, and different recovery protocols to some extent. Those being things like cryotherapy or contrast therapy, hot and cold, oxygen therapies, IV therapies. Yeah, we'll try. We'll look at all different things. So just opened the first one in Melbourne.
And there's a physical premises?
Yeah, it's a physical premises. Yep. We'll do blood works anywhere in Australia.
Cool.
So we've got we've got an app that can do that. The physical premises for the equipment.
Yep.
We have to call it a passion project because if we called it a serious business right now, we'd be 3 very unsuccessful business people. But it's every day it's picking up. Like the people come through and it's just because it's not available here. It's in every corner in Los Angeles and you'll find them in New York, but you won't find them in Australia. And preventative health in Australia is something that just doesn't exist, right? So it's a new thing. And why wouldn't you, right? Like if I said to you, and I know you're into it as well, so it's a bit different, but if I said to you, why wouldn't you measure your bloods to try and live longer and feel better, right? It's a pretty simple thing, right? Once a year, we do it 3 times a year, take your blood, tell you we're not looking for wrong, we're looking to optimize.
Yeah.
And so it's become a big thing. So that's the next thing. So I'm really, really bullish about tech in the health sector. Always have been. Yeah. But in this sector now, it's actually the health sector for us now that we're getting into. So we've had to hire an amazing group of people around us who know what we're doing because if we did it, it's not our expertise. Our expertise is being the patient. Yeah. But again, understanding what we do. Like everything that we sell, I've done it. Right. We've just brought in a new tool, a new product, which is a 5-day fast mimicking diet, which basically means for 5 days you mimic not eating. Right, so you stay under a caloric intake of like 1,000 in the first day and 800 for the 4 after. Yes, with a little pouch of food that you get given. Right, I don't need to do it, and I know I don't, but I'll do it. Right, because if I don't understand it, how do we offer it as a service to someone? So we'll try everything.
Okay, we're gonna have fun here, Tristan. So okay, if so many questions I have coming up, and I guess I just want to help give the context for people that might be listening who are not in like our worlds. I shared with you this is very much in my world too, around longevity space. And you might have the cynical person who's like, oh, come on, you can't live longer. What if you get hit by a bus? And like the reality is like, so even if you can't push the time because you can't live longer because something happens, it's about that feeling better for longer. It's about the, it's about the health span as much as it's about the lifespan, So like, the difference between, I know a guy called David Shane, he's 60-ish something, and he's recently competed in a half Ironman. And then you see another 6-year-old who's like can't pick up the grandkid. It's like the difference between those two things. And so I think it's so important just as like a generalized topic.
Yeah.
But let me focus on the business element for one moment for the audience. What were the learning lessons you brought from going through these different business cycles to go, okay, here are the things I'm going to do different on this next side venture, as we say right now?
Yeah. So through the different cycles, you learn. It's a hard question because what would I do? They're very different businesses, right? The one thing I learned is, and I'm probably a bit fortunate to be in this situation, but to take some bigger risks up front,
Yes.
right? And not cash-wise, and don't compromise on quality, right? So I wouldn't say I've compromised on quality before, but when you're bootstrapping something and doing it on a shoestring at start, you've got to work out the cheapest and easiest way to do something.
Yeah.
We bought the best equipment up front. And yeah, one of my business partners in it he's been really adamant that this is the first Apple shop in Australia, right? It has to be the piece de resistance of longevity, right? You've got to have everything. It's got to be the best of the best. And when people walk in, they give you a 5-star review. We've got 65 5-star reviews on Google within a month of opening.
Yeah, that's
right?
huge, yeah.
So that's not a bad effort. Everyone comes in, they love it, right?
Where in Melbourne is it?
Armadale.
Okay.
High Street
I'm in
Armadale.
Melbourne on Friday. I want to come and see it.
Yeah. Oh, come here.
Are you in Melbourne on Friday?
I'll
No.
be, yeah. We'll get you in there.
Yeah,
for sure.
great. I want to see it.
Yeah, so it's no compromise on quality, right? Absolutely nothing. That's number one. The second one is just to really make sure from the start, like it took me a while to get to that stage of really understanding the team and putting the right team together, like in my world. Like I was fortunate because when you started, it's like you're hiring people, whatever, it's kind of a bit different. From the start, we have hired the team that's just unbelievable, but because they're running it and we're doing other things, right? Like just let them do their stuff, right? But make sure you teach them. Don't expect that they're going to just know what to do. So the main learning of, lead by example, like I'm in there and I'm like, I'll do the first cryo. I'll do the first ice bath. I'll clean the first ice bath and show you how to do it. If I need to, I'm doing the first fast mimic diet for all of us, right? Lead by example by doing it. And that's what I would have done. But that took me a while to get to in the tech world as well.
Yeah.
To kind of get to that. Kind of fell into it, but definitely showing them how to do it. And some of the stuff's pretty extreme. Like, I had the guys, have you done NAD?
NAD. Remind me what that stands for.
I can't even pronounce it. Nitroxic. It's a longevity drug, right?
Yeah. Okay. No.
Right. So you do it as an IV, and it's one thing you can do in Australia.
And it's quite painful. And they drip it slowly, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So you do it slowly because you can get cramps and whatever.
Yeah.
Some people tolerate it better.
Yeah.
So I showed them. Like I'm not the first person to go through it. I've had nurses who've never done it before. And I'm like, I'll do it. And then last week, we're all having boosters and going around. So you have a bit of fun with it too. As well. But teach them how to do it because there's some more extreme things and some things that are easier to do. Yeah.
And from like a science perspective, because I'm just deeply curious about this, right? Is like this whole field is moving so quickly, and you have people like the Hubermans of the world who are bringing in the research. One of the things I see from the outside in is can be a little bit of a trap in this current, like you see some people using the word longevity, and there's a few charlatans in the space, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get people offside, but there's people making lots of money selling shit that's like, my favorite recent one, I'm not going to name the name, people will figure it out if they know, nitrogen water, like a metal spoon that you spin the water and you've now lifted it up with nitrogen, and this guy is huge, like he's blown up and making millions of dollars, and you're like, you've just swiveled a stick in water, right? Yeah. Now, obviously, stuff you're talking about isn't there, but how do you balance the making sure, hey, this is cutting edge, therefore there's probably only a few studies to this is actually making a material difference. The things we know make a material difference today is like sleep and nutrition. Yep. And then there's like the added layers of stuff, but they're in the early stages. Yep. How do you balance that?
Yeah, so sometimes you got to tell people you don't know, right? People come into our clinic and we say, well, we actually don't know you're going to get a benefit out of it, right? But the sciences behind it suggests that this is what it will do.
Yeah.
And we do it and we feel amazing.
Yeah.
Right. So the greatest one is, what's the difference between an ice bath and a cryotherapy? Right. And the fact is they're both cold therapies. Right. They both reduce inflammation. They both get your cardiovascular system working. They're both good for immunity. Right. But my personal experience is I ice bath every day. I do it more for mood and mindset, right? And resilience. Yeah. Because you get up, not everyone lives in Sydney in the beautiful weather, right? I got up this morning to fly to Sydney and it was 4 degrees outside and my ice bath was 4 degrees. It was raining, it was foggy and it was cold, right? And it's just like, and I'll do it, right?
And did you get in this morning?
6 a.m. every morning,
I love
right?
it.
And if I don't do it, I feel guilty.
Yeah, good.
So I'm actually not. So the benefit of the inflammation, I probably get that from 3 times a week, right?
Yeah.
And the cryo as well. But I don't have the luxury of doing a cryo every single day because I don't have a machine sitting at home. Would I do it in the morning? I think the ice bath is harder. So it's the hardest thing I'll do every day, right? So there's different things. So I can talk from experience. So that's the way that we weigh it up.
Great.
We can say, okay, well, we've done all this and this is how we feel. Evidence and science will catch up.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always contrast and there's great science around that. But certain things like, swiveling a metal, whatever, wherever, it's like kind of, if you put one arm in the air and touch your toe at the same time, you'll live for 7 more years. There's people in the US who will come out and on podcasts will say, you will live for 7 years if you do this. And if you don't, you will die. And it's like, no, that's going a bit too far. But I mean, it's just simple stuff. I think I heard the other day, if you do 20% of the work will make 80% of the difference.
Yes.
And I've seen that myself in my blood works. Like I've had one blood marker, which was hemoglobin A1C, your blood sugar levels. I was on the borderline. I'm a healthy, fit person. I was on the borderline of pre-diabetic.
Wow.
And I changed my diet slightly and I'm now optimal. Right?
Wow.
So the improvement, but had I never tested it, I would have never known.
Yeah.
And by the way, your analogy before, the way to combat that, you can walk outside and get hit by a bus. Well, you take your car in for a service every year, right?
Yeah.
Right? Your car can also get hit and get written off
that's
too,
right.
but you'll still service your car, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so service yourself.
So take that, Steve, who just thought about that.
Yeah, Steve.
And it's a really interesting space because I think it's one of those ones that's going to see significant tailwinds with as AI rips through and is able to add benefits. Like if there's something that's going to be able to add significant benefits to AI into the health space in terms of the ability to ingest that much data and then be able to make, these big changes. And I want to pull, look, it's always funny when you get quoted, but I'm going to do it. I saw a quote that you said, which is, robots aren't stealing our jobs. They're just giving us more time to be human. And I want to play a little thought experiment. It's 5 years from today. Is that still true?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Why?
So the more we teach AI to do stuff, the more. So you think about the diagnosis in healthcare, right? Symptoms to diagnose and to treat stuff, right? Most of the stuff we get better and better at, right? It's like 20 years ago, if you got cancer, you died, right? Now you get cancer, there's a good chance there's a cure for it, right? But something else is going to come, right? And if we don't give ourselves the time to be able to think about this stuff, then it's that 10%, 20% of stuff that we don't know about that we can't teach the AI because we don't know about it yet, that we're not going to get to, right? And that can become the next COVID, right? So imagine we had AI that could do 90% of the work during COVID on, the biggest topical thing around the vaccine or something like that, or how, do we need it, do we not need it? Then we could have focused on the really important stuff. So I absolutely think we will always stay ahead of robots because they only ever know what we can teach them. And we are always evolving, right? Humanity has evolved completely. Every decade something new happens, right? Like 10 years ago, we didn't have, probably more than 10 years now, but 13, 14 years ago, we didn't have an iPhone. 20 years ago, we didn't have the internet, right? We've evolved to learn this sort of stuff. So robots have evolved to where we are now. And then we'll learn more, create new stuff, get them to catch up, and we'll be able to be more human.
Interesting. Now, I don't often do this, but I want to have a live challenge of that, just from a thought experiment place. I think it all comes in my mind. So just to let me contextualize for you.
Yeah.
I ain't an expert, so everybody listening, but I listen to a weird amount of content from all the different people and all the different players, whether it be people building out the AI models or the Sam Altmans of the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Based on all that, I've kind of comprised my own view of what it looks like. And I don't know if I fully agree. And here's why. We're on that exponential curve of growth, and I think it's really hard to comprehend what exponential looks like. And is it true today that we're teaching the models? Yes. However, where they've gotten to is essentially figuring out that the more space, power, and microchips, the more IQ points, the
AI has, and with Microsoft investing $5 billion a year to go and acquire land, looking to build mini nuclear cell power plants to power it, I think it gets to a tipping point in a very not too distant future where the tipping point is it's teaching itself.
Yep.
And I'm not so much like, oh no, we're all going to be in the Minority Report or something crazy like that. But I don't know if we've had something that can be a parallel. And look, I'm doing it on a podcast here, so I could be getting roasted in like 5 years' time.
Yep.
But the thing I have in my mind is like, I think the change happens so dramatically that the void between jobs lost and jobs created through this new learning might be too big of a time span. And so let me bring it down home one more time. You look at different countries. So I think something like Philippines has, I think it's something like 90% of their GDP is offshoring. Mm-hmm. And like, what are those offshoring tasks? It's, virtual assistant, phone, all those kind of things. And so to your point, which is the learning, I wonder if, when we look at the lens of it, we're thinking about the top 20% of like smartest and brightest people in the world. And then there's people that are doing tasks that are kind of repetitive. And so then you look at it from a macro sense, I kind of think they might be going to take our jobs. I don't know. Challenge my thinking, because I've been trying to be testing this theory in my mind.
Yeah, so I like the Philippines one. I was actually there recently and went over and having a look at outsourcing, and one of my business partners, both of them have started something over there. Yeah. It's interesting. So the same question came up, right? Like AI could do 90% of answering the questions, or should be able to at some point in time. But then there's more and more commerce going on, more and more people around, more and more interactions, right? And more harder, like the technology gets harder, the services we get harder, the things that we offer, there's more of. So if we advance in that, we can't teach the technology to keep up with it over time. So there's an argument there that there's just if you didn't have them, you wouldn't be able to keep up in the first place. And the second part is that, there's more and more of these product services, people, all these things being offered all the time that you need to kind of offer it through. Quantum computing is probably what you're looking for in that, the microchips to kind of build all that stuff out. The other thing to think about as well is that you can use AI to be like the cyber cops to some extent, but they can also be the cyber fighters, right? But something needs to be in between it to kind of create the new way to do something, the new security, the new different services and offerings and stuff around that. So, I don't know. I hear a lot of people talk about I call it the sci-fi decision. It's which way do we go?
Future.
Like, the robot's going to rule us, or we're going to rule them? And I just go back to, the prediction was by 2025 we would be fully autonomous vehicles.
So
every time we predict this sort of stuff, it never happens, right?
No.
So there's going to be stuff that will keep up. We just got to stay ahead of ourselves a little bit and reinvent.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're a human optimist. I like it. Yeah. that's good.
As long as I die that way, that's fine.
And that makes sense for the new business. So last question I have for you. If you, at this point in time of your journey and these different steps and now kind of looking into your future, you take a moment to reflect of what do you think the thing is you're most proud of to this point?
Yeah, it's a really easy one for me. I am most proud of the people I brought on the journey, right? So back to my first business partner and my main business partner, the two of us were basically junior burgers at PwC together. From the day where he was questioning, do I come on? Do we do this? Do we not do this? Whatever, to seeing where he is today, to every single person around, like the team. I just like that. That gives me more joy than anything else. I could drive any car, live in out, whatever, go on any holiday. None of that gives me as much satisfaction as that. And now I give back a lot of that too. So I do a lot of volunteering to different places on advisory boards and stuff because I want to make sure I can impact more people that way too. And that's also taught me as a father too, how to kind of bring the kids on the journey too. But that's the thing I'm most proud of. I look at the guys that I've worked with, and they are genuinely not colleagues; they're my friends. And I'm happy when I see someone go out and say, "Oh, I just bought myself the new BMW X5 because we smashed it in this business." I'm like, or someone who, a good mate of mine who's now become the CEO of another business. I'm like, you may be a competitor now, but that's so good, right? So excited for them. So that's, for me, the easy one.
Why is that? Why is it that first reflection is more about the other people? Why do you think that makes you feel that way?
I think there's two types of founders and people that exit. Those that go out and, it's all about the money, right? It's all about the wealth creation and stuff. It's a competition or a challenge. And I think with that, you'll never quite achieve your goal because there's always someone who's going to do better than you, right? Whereas if you are happy with what you've done, financially, I've done well out of all of this, but I've got to look for more than just competing with the next biggest person, right? To me, it's more about what can I do for other people, and it's probably just my personality too, right? It's something that I've always enjoyed, being a team player, and I remember hearing, is it Steve McGraw, the rugby player in the New Zealand champion rugby player? I'm definitely not a rugby person. I'm into footy and Hawthorn.
You're in good company.
Yeah, so I was with the Hawthorn Footy Club with the leadership team last year. I think it was last year, and he was talking about it, and what was his biggest achievement was the fact that he brought everyone else on the journey, and he said, it's a sport analogy. Like you don't need to be the number one; you want the team to win, right? And I've just always been that way, which is kind of odd because if you go back to, I was a triathlete, right? All I cared about was me getting across the finish line first, not bringing everyone else along the journey. And I never really did well at team sports. I was always that individual who had to fight for myself. But I don't know, maybe it's just something I found as a passion and it's something that I just enjoy. I like seeing other people succeed because then you've got a group of friends around you that have all done it together. You can share in the happiness and the success.
I love it. And as you share that, I reflect back to right in the beginning of our conversation, you being the fourth of four kids. And and also the triathlete piece is while you're in the midst of that, I can imagine you wanted to do how do I stand out from the crowd? I'd be a team sport of one. And then now in the later years, it's understanding that's that collection that makes each kid unique in its own way. Yeah. So there's my role as a psychologist for one moment. Tristan, what an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed.
Yeah, thanks for having me.